Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our second webinar, all about the application Q&A. My name is Amir Bagdachi. I'll introduce my colleagues in just a moment. But what we're going to do today is we're going to keep it nice, tight, and focused. We are answering questions that you've given us about the housing application. You sent in your questions, and we got some over the phone as well and by email, questions that we know come up time and time again. The goal of this session is to get you the information you need so that you can fill out that application to reflect really what your preferences are. So joining me, I'm Amir Bagdachi, by the way, with Michigan Housing. Some of you I may have met in Campus Day. And joining me are my two colleagues, and I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Matt. Who are you, Matt?
Thanks, Amir. I am Matt Pohutsky. I'm the Front Desk Operations Coordinator for the Housing Information Office. I supervise the day-to-day operations, including all of the incoming phone calls, emails, web chat that our wonderful student employees handle, as well as the M-Card operation that our office also handles.
Fabulous.
Hi, everyone. Ashley Albright here. I also work in the Housing Information Office, and I handle all health and disability accommodation requests as well as religious observance requests as well.
Right. So we've got the all-star team of people who can answer your questions. Here's the format of what we're going to do. So we've got a sense of some of the big question areas because you let us know what they are. We're going to walk through them, delving into our expertise to answer each one. You may have questions that occur to you throughout. We've got a team also behind the scenes, answers any questions that you might pop into the Q&A. But more importantly, we're going to reserve a little bit of time at the end of this session for us to get some questions that have bubbled up. So if you have a question, pretty strong chance, I've got a feeling that we will probably get to it in the course of the next few minutes as we go through the questions you've already asked. But just know that if there's a question that we don't get to, we may get to it at the very end of this. And you can always ask us questions afterwards. We know the deadline is around the corner, but we will make sure you get your questions answered so you know what you need to know to turn in that housing application by the deadline, May 6th. So without further ado, let's get started with the basics. First question, which is given to us through the registration question, do I have to live on campus my first year? Is there a requirement to live for your first year on campus at the University of Michigan? The answer is no. No, you don't. There is no requirement. If you signed into the webinar to discover the answer to this question, you may officially leave the webinar because there's nothing more of use to you here. You don't have to. About 97% of students do choose to live on campus, but you don't need to write an essay about why you don't want to. Just don't apply for housing. Now, if you do apply for housing and change your mind, definitely let us know because it really helps. But again, you're not required to live on campus. Next question, one of the biggest ones, is if we send in the housing app sooner, do we find out our housing assignment sooner? / does submitting my housing application earlier increase my chances of getting the preferences I list on the application? So, great news. If you need a little bit of time to get your ducks in a row before turning in that housing application, fantastic. Take that time because actually it's not first come, first serve. There's no benefit to getting your housing application super early. It doesn't mean you get your preferences answered especially early. Basically, everything that comes in by May 6th, we give a random number and that's how we do the assignments. So there's no incentive to do it earlier. And submission date really doesn't impact when you're going to receive your contract. Now, someone wants to know, if I already applied for housing, can I still make changes to my application before the deadline? Matt, tell us.
Absolutely. We can actually allow you to make changes up until 11:59 p.m. on Friday, May 6th. You can actually do it by going right into the Student Housing Business Portal, which is the same location that you went to initially apply. I actually just double checked today because we get this question a lot, and the only thing that you can't change on the application is your contact information. So if you need to change that, send us an email. After the May 6th deadline, we can, on a case-by-case basis, still make changes. You would have to email us for that. But the best way to ensure that your application preferences are what you want them to be is to get those application changes in by 11:59 p.m. on Friday, May 6th.
Great. Thank you. So next question, if I submitted my application for housing, let's say you did it already, are you all set? Or is there anything else you need to do? So if you have filled the housing application, you've submitted it, it was what you wanted, then actually, yes, you basically are set until we begin emailing out contracts, which happens all summer long. So you might not hear from us right away. You may hear in June, July, into August. But if you submitted your application, you are all set. The one thing that's really worth noting is that we do have a section where you can request health or religious observance accommodations. And I would make doubly sure that we have all the information that we need for those. So make sure we've got all the necessary documentation if needed. So next question. I sort of hinted at this, but maybe Matt can get into a little bit more. When do we find out our assignments? Does it depend if we're in a living learning community? Give us the rundown. When can we expect to hear about housing?
No problem. Assignments go out on a rolling basis throughout the summer. So that could mean anytime throughout June and July. Like you said, Amir, even possibly a little into August, but our goal is hopefully by the end of July, everything will be done. It does not matter when you submitted your application. So if you submitted it at the beginning of the application period earlier this month, or if you waited until May 6th, that has no bearing on when you're actually going to get your offer. It is completely random. Big thing that's very important is to check your email early and often. All of the major communications that come from our office, we send to you via email. So if we're going to send you a contract offer, that's where it's going to go. So make sure you're checking your email regularly.
Great. And Matt, one little follow-up there. Does being in a living learning program affect when you might hear about your housing?
It might to some extent. We generally do assignments in chunks based on certain groups before we get to the general population. So that could be things like the living learning communities, sometimes the assignments work that Ashley does surrounding health or religious observance accommodations. We need to have those done first before we can start doing general placements. So if you are in some type of living learning community or have requested an accommodation, you may find out a little bit earlier in the assignment season than you would if you're in the general population.
Great. That's really good to know. So, of course, the big question is, where do most first years get placed? Ashley, tell them this crucial bit of news.
So we have several residence halls throughout campus, 3 different neighborhoods. First year students are placed in most of these residence halls with a few exceptions. So the great thing is, regardless of what building you're placed in, there will be a significant number of first year students in that building as well.
Perfect. So I'm going to jump down to another question. One question someone asked, how long does it take for an application to be approved? And will I be notified if my application for housing is declined? So these are great questions. So as Matt suggested, once you apply, it can take all of June, July, sometimes even into August for you to hear back from us. Now, we make sure that we've got enough space to accommodate all new incoming first-year students who are starting in the fall. So if you are a new first-year student, and you're going to be starting this fall, and you applied by the May 6th deadline, you can be confident that you're going to get housing. If you haven't heard from us in July, you don't need to worry, has it been declined somewhere? We actually really, really try to get every single last person who applies by the May 6th deadline. Lets us know ahead of time that they want housing. So get it by May 6th, basically, and then relax, because then you've got your ducks in a row. You did everything right. Just enjoy the rest of your life and let housing happen quietly in the background. So next question, do you have to complete your M card at the same time as your housing? Matt, you're the expert.
No. We do ask, though, that if you have the ability to submit a photo, please do it sooner rather than later. More information on M card will be coming further into the summer. We don't send out confirmations once you submit your photo. So if you're waiting on something like that, you probably won't get it. But if something goes wrong when the file gets transferred to us, like it comes in too small or something like that, we will let you know so that you can resend it.
Awesome. So someone's sort of thinking ahead. Once I get my contract, am I set? First, what does it mean to get your contract? Well, to get your contract, you're going to get an email from Michigan Housing. In the subject line, it says urgent, all capital letters. Your housing contract is ready. That's our way of saying that it is urgent, and you should open this email. Open it, And at that point, actually, yes, there is something you still have to do. You've got to open that contract and sign it. To make it actually valid, to get that space, you've got to go in and electronically sign that contract. Now, we give you 5 business days from when you receive that contract, not when you open the email, but when we sent the email, to look it over and sign it. Now, if you got a contract and you didn't sign it and you don't actually want to live with us, please let us know, because actually we're waiting to hear about that so we can release that room for someone else who was very patiently waiting. So once you receive that email, you're not all set. One extra step: sign the contract. Someone else wants to know, they won't have regular internet access over the summer. Will the contract also be sent to another email address, like maybe a family one provided? Ashley, help us out.
So while we will not send your contract to your secondary email address, we will only send it to your UMich email address, but we will send a reminder to your secondary email address to remind you to sign your housing contract. But it really doesn't have to be a concern if you're traveling over the summer, because if you know that you're going to be gone and you might be receiving a housing contract during that time, just shoot us a quick email and we'll put a note on your account not to cancel your contract.
That's great. Yep. Michigan students do all kinds of things over the summer. Of course, you may be on a mountaintop doing something very, very important, but we got to make sure your housing's sorted out. So let's delve into the enduring mystery of room types. First question: is there a place to find room dimensions? Answer: not really. No. As it turns out, we don't have general room dimensions on the housing website. That said, usually on the first week of August, if you have your housing assignment, we'll send you an email and that will give you a link to some rough room dimensions to help you plan. If you're wondering, yes, but how can I start planning right now? Plan on that room being small. Then you'll only be pleased if it's not. That's the best way to approach it. Now, let's get into some more specifics. Can you give a brief overview of different room types? Someone wants to know. And no better person can do that than Matt. Go for it.
No pressure. So on our application, and some of you may have submitted it already, there are 3 room types to select from. We have single occupancy, double occupancy, and suite style. Single occupancy refers to rooms where you are the only person in the room, and that's it. Double occupancy means that it's you and a roommate in one room together. Suite style generally is going to refer to rooms that are higher than double occupancy, which is most of the time going to be a triple or a quad, so 3 or 4 people in the space. There is no standard arrangement for these room types. So even if you get assigned a triple or a quad, it's going to be different if you're in one hall versus another. Just about every building has every room type that we offer in terms of the first year application. So requesting a room type does not lock you into a specific hall.
Great. On to maybe one of the hottest questions of the season. What are my chances of getting a single? And I should say before we get into that, if one of your reasons for a single involves a health accommodation, we'll be getting to that a little bit later. But for right now, Matt, what are your chances of getting a single?
Well, there's no way to really predict probability. It's a lot of it's tied to demand and availability. If somebody is requesting a single as their first or second choice, we do try to get them into there. There is a cost factor involved, as singles are our most expensive room type. So we do want to make sure that the people that we're placing in those rooms have specifically requested one. Just one thing to point out is that if you are applying for a living learning community, doubles are going to be the most common room types for MLCs and themes. Your placement in that community is going to kind of override your preferences. So even if you do request a single as your first choice, if you're in an MLC or a theme, we probably won't be able to place you into one.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about other room type preferences? What are my chances of getting a particular room type preference? If your top choice is a double, a triple, or a quad, what are the chances?
Well, for anyone that's already submitted the application, you've probably noticed that there's only so many things that you can preference on it. We basically limit it to room type, gender, corridor designation, environment preference, and that's because we have so much demand. and we would love to meet everybody's preferences. We can't guarantee them. Some options, like a double, are really common, so that's a pretty easy request that we can meet. Other preference options, like all female housing, which we only have in 3 residence halls on campus, it can be a little bit more difficult. So it really kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you're just looking for a double with a roommate, generally we can do that for you.
Great. So a roommate question that also ties into a room type question. Say you want a triple or a quad. Is there a way to put the roommates down? Like, do you put the other 2 roommates, other 3 roommates? And is there a particular way to think about that? Matt, tell us more.
Yeah, so on the application, there are 3 roommate request boxes that you can fill in. It is important to note that these are ranked. So if you do want to try to get into a suite style room and you put that as your first room preference, then yes, feel free to request 3 roommates. But because we are very limited on those suite style spaces, the odds are still very high that we would end up having to place you in a double occupancy room. So that first roommate that you request, you want to make sure that that's the person that you would want to live with if we end up having to put you in a double occupancy space. And you also want to make sure that they request you as their top choice on their application. Kind of like I was saying before, triple and quad layouts are unique to the specific building that they're in. There's not one uniform floor plan. So even if you get into one, you might want to hold off on thinking how you want to arrange the space until you get a chance to see it.
Absolutely. That's right. Some of them are 2 rooms. Some of them are giant caverns. You'll find out when you arrive, or from the rough room dimensions. So on the application, it talks about suite style. You've maybe alluded to it a little bit. It's kind of mysterious. What do we mean by suite style? Matt, tell us more.
So we consider a suite to consist of multiple bedrooms behind a door that leads to a residence hall corridor. It may include a private bathroom or private living room spaces, kind of like what you were saying before. There are some quads where it's just one big room. And then there are other quads where it is 2 rooms connecting to a hallway, but there's also a private bathroom in the space. You won't know until if you request that type when you get your contract, what room type you've actually been assigned in that category.
Right. So kind of along those lines, are doubles with private bathrooms available? And is it possible to pay extra for a bathroom?
It is not possible to pay extra for a bathroom. Only the options for the rate groups listed on the application are what we have available. So some suite style options, like I was saying previously, will have a private or semi-private bathroom, but there's not an option to specifically request rooms of this type. Just in general, private bathrooms are extremely uncommon campus-wide, and the vast majority of students that were living on campus are going to be living in spaces where they have access to a community bathroom.
Yeah, that's great. So it's just good to bear in mind, most of our spots are double rooms. That's kind of the classic traditional college experience. And most of them are set up to be double rooms with a community bathroom down that corridor. So we love the offer to pay more to get the extra bathroom, but we can't actually build one, even if we had that extra cash, into that room. So it's a wonderful idea. We appreciate the gesture, but we cannot satisfy you in that regard. But bathrooms, one of the hottest topics. And the first question is, do all the halls have community bathrooms, and how can I get out of it? I appreciate the candor of this question. Ashley, share the truth.
So yes, all of our residence halls have community style bathrooms. There are a sprinkling of rooms in each of the buildings that have maybe a double with an attached bath or a single with a private bath, but there are very few of these rooms. So most of you will be living in a double. You'll be sharing a community style bathroom. I actually was just watching some videos on YouTube earlier, some vlogs from some former students who have been speaking very highly of the cleanliness of our bathrooms on campus. So check it out for yourself. Those are facts. So we do have, so all of our community bathrooms, they are individual toilets and individual shower stalls. We have gender inclusive bathrooms in our gender inclusive living experience, which is located in East Quad. And then we do have a few gender inclusive single use restrooms sprinkled throughout some of the dorms on campus as well. All of our bathrooms are accessed via key card. So these bathrooms are designated male, female, or gender inclusive. If your preference is to have access to a gender inclusive bathroom, which are primarily single use, you will want to make sure that you fill out the gender inclusive housing form, which is available on the Michigan Housing website. And then, as I noted before, we do have a very small number of private and attached baths, but the drawback is you have to clean that yourself. So once you get into the routine of going to the community bathroom, you take your shower caddy, you got your flip-flops on, definitely wear some shower shoes, even though it's clean. It'll just become routine and you'll get used to it pretty quickly.
Thank you. So lots of students will be in the community bathroom situation. And Matt was talking about room types, but there's also corridor types. And some of our corridors are going to be male corridors, and some of them, those corridors will be female corridors, but some others are going to be mixed male and female corridors. So how does a community bathroom work on that kind of corridor?
Sure. So if you are on a mixed gender corridor, which is very common, a lot of our floors are mixed gender because students tend to preference that. There will be a male designated restroom and a female designated restroom. And as I said before, you will only have key card access to one of those bathroom types. So if you are in a female double, you will be assigned to the female designated restroom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you can always request access to the single use gender inclusive bathroom if that's on your floor.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about buildings and neighborhoods. In the housing application, do we select specific residence halls or rank our preferences? So on the application, there isn't a space for you to say, these are my top 5 residence halls. We ask again for whether North Campus is your top preference or not, because we want to try to make that happen. And some environment types, room type, and then roommate. Those are the biggest preferences there. But again, we don't ask for particular rooms because we're really trying to meet the most important things that you're looking for, which is, who am I going to live with and what kind of room style is going to work for me. So you won't be able to identify particular residence halls to be in. That said, actually, if you apply and are in one of these living learning programs, because each of these programs resides in a particular building, if you apply and get in, that is tantamount to essentially being assigned to that particular building. So bear that in mind. That's a major factor that would affect exactly which hall you're in. Next question. Someone says, hey, I have been in engineering. Is North Campus the default option? Are certain buildings better for certain majors? It's a common question. Matt, what's the truth?
It is a very common question. So one of the key things to keep in mind is that the majority of students aren't formally declaring a major until their sophomore year. And on top of that, we don't make placements based on class schedule or major. A lot of times students haven't even started picking their classes yet, and we've already been making assignments. If you prefer to live on North Campus, you can absolutely list that as your first preference on your application, but we do not look at class schedule or major when we're making placements.
Absolutely. And I should add, to the question, are certain buildings maybe better for certain majors? Well, you don't have your course schedule yet, as Matt says. Even so, if you feel like, hey, this particular building here really is really close to where I think a lot of my classes are going to be, even then, we will not be necessarily placing you there because we don't look here in housing at what you're studying. Your school and college doesn't play in to where we assign you. Now, can you explain the difference, someone asks, between living on Central, Hill, or North? How do you know if your building is the best for you? Very easy question to answer. There is really no need to explain the difference between Central, Hill, and North because you don't have much of a say in where you're going to be assigned. Those are geographic locations. Central Campus, you probably maybe visited it. But there are, I'd say about 25% of our incoming class will live on North Campus. Maybe about and then the rest are evenly divided between Central and Hill. Central and Hill are quite close to each other. And again, how do you know which building is right for you? It's really important to stress that all the buildings have a lot of the same basic amenities. And the thing that determines whether it's right for you is whether it's the community for you. And most of these buildings for first-year students, they're all brand new people. You're not moving into it in a pre-existing community where it's like, oh, these 800 people have already lived here last year. No, if it's a building of 500, that's basically 500 brand new people. So whether it's right for you or not has a lot to do with whether you make it right for you. That's the thing, making it feel like it's home. And wherever you want to be at home, wherever you can make yourself at home, that's going to be the best building for you. This is the truth that we have learned over 100 years of high quality collegiate housing experience. All right, next question. What's the size of East Quad, West Quad, South Quad? Matt, you're a numbers expert.
Well, rather than kind of break down each hall, I think the easiest way to answer that question is to say that our largest hall is Bursley Hall, which is on North Campus, and that has about roughly 1,200 rooms. On the opposite end of the spectrum, our smallest hall is Fletcher, which can only hold about 75 students. And then all the other halls are kind of in between. East, West, South are on the larger end of the scale, closer to Bursley than they are to Fletcher.
Great. Absolutely. Yeah, the key thing is that our buildings were put together between 1915 and 2010. There was no prevailing theory on how to do it that was the same the whole time. So, what is the layout of a male and female corridor? Do you do it by floors, alternating floors, by wings? Ashley, what can you tell us about that?
Depending on which building you're in, the layout could be different. So there could be an entire floor, could be all gender, an entire floor could be all female, or there could be a wing or one hallway of a floor that's female that connects to another hallway that's male designated. So it really depends on what building you end up in and what floor you're on. But if you do choose all male, you can be assured that at least your entire hallway will be male designated, and same for female. If you choose female designated, you can be assured that your entire hallway will be a female designated hallway.
Great. That leads us into the next question. We do have some all-female buildings. What are the differences between them? And if I asked for Martha Cook, what's the likelihood? Matt, talk to us.
Sure. So, as you were saying, we have three different all-female buildings: Betsy Barber, Helen Newberry, and Martha Cook. Betsy Barber and Helen Newberry operate the same as all of our other residence halls, outside of the fact that the building itself is all-female designated. They do not have a dining hall. So most students that are living in Barber Newberry are going to be dining at South Quad, which is the closest walking distance dining hall to those buildings. Martha Cook operates differently. It has a lot of unique traditions like Friday afternoon tea, sit down Sunday dinners. The dining hall in Martha Cook is actually exclusively for Martha Cook residents. And as a Martha Cook resident, that is the only dining hall that you're permitted to eat at during the week. But you do get some meal swipes that you can use at other dining halls on the weekends. Availability for Martha Cook is limited. You can indicate on the application that you're interested in living there. But if we can't place you in Martha Cook and you're still looking for an all-female building, we'll try to do our best to get you in one of the other ones.
Great. Thank you. So let's talk about a little bit more about these living learning programs, these living learning communities. So one basic question that we get is, should I think about applying for one of these? So I'd say only about 1 in 3 incoming students is in a living learning program. We have different kinds, themes and Michigan learning communities. Of the two, the Michigan learning communities have an academic component. And they are honestly a great option if you're passionate about a subject or a theme and you'd love to start your university experience living with people who already care about that thing. It's not all the programming, not all the events, not the only thing you're into, but it'll be a dimension of your first year experience. So I'd say the best way to figure out whether you should apply, and there's still time to apply, is to go on the housing website and look up themes and MLCs. You can hit the help button and type in themes and review them. There's about 20 altogether between the two different types. If there's anything that speaks to you, and there's all different kinds, think about it and apply. Just knowing that that's going to affect your housing, because if you apply and get in, that will determine the building that you're in. So if someone does want to apply now, how do they apply? Matt, walk us through.
So in terms of the living learning communities, they have separate applications from the housing application. All students need to do the housing application regardless of their admission or acceptance status to a living learning community. if you've paid your enrollment deposit by May 1st, then you will receive an email with a link to the general housing application at minimum 24 hours prior to the application deadline, but we do try to get it to you a little earlier than that, so you have a couple extra days. If you've paid earlier, as in earlier than this week, and you still haven't gotten a link to the application, please email us or call us as soon as you can, because we do want to make sure that you get time to fill out the application. And you do still, like I said earlier, want to make sure that you submit it by 11:59 p.m. on Friday, May 6th. Trying to think if there was anything else, but that's, I think, the general gist of it.
Okay, fantastic. And by the way, this is a great time to note, if you've got questions that are bubbling up in the chat or the Q&A, we will be having time at the end of this to get some questions that we haven't got to in the course of it. So we'd say in most cases, buckle up, because we may very well get to your question, but we're also keeping tabs of the ones that are bubbling up, and we'll get to as many as we can. So next question, let's say that someone has applied to a living learning program. They're still waiting. Should they wait to complete the housing application? Matt?
No, please do not wait. Because the way that the process works is that the general housing application is done by May 6th. But decisions generally come out from the MLCs up to a week or 2 weeks later. We work with the MLC and theme communities directly for placements. So like we were saying earlier, we do those placements before we do the general population. So even if you submitted your application, you haven't heard anything by May 6th, don't worry. They will let you know, and then they will pass that information along to us so that we can place you in the appropriate community.
Great. So there are lots of different communities, and two of them are Honors Housing and the RC. How do they work? Because they're a little bit different, right?
They are. They're two of our larger programs. So generally, they're working with students much earlier than the housing application actually opens up. For the residential college, you don't need to indicate that on your application. There's a little section about the residential college on the application, but most people that are in that program already know that they're in it. And they will reach out to us when we start doing assignments on who's going to be in that program for placement. For the honors program, there are two questions that are yes or no. The first one is, have you been accepted to the honors program? Which, if you have been, you don't have to live in the honors housing component. But the second question does ask, do you want to live in honors housing, which is a yes or no question. One of the questions we've been getting commonly about this is, what if I don't know right now? You can submit the application now with that question answered as no if you haven't been admitted yet, and then you can go back and edit it once you've gotten your decision. If it's after May 6th, just email us to let us know and we can update your application.
Great. Now, do learning communities take precedence over whatever else you put in your housing application? And if you're accepted to an MLC or a theme, how will housing know that someone's been, has been accepted and then has a particular building they've got to live in? So the best way to do that, as Matt touched on a little bit before, is we work with the theme communities and the Michigan learning communities. They tell us. You don't have to worry about it. You apply, and if you get in, they will tell us, and they will say, hey, these people over here, they're going to be living in this community. Now, and Matt's touched on this before, learning communities, being a part of one, that's basically one of the highest level preferences, even more than roommate preference. So we're going to take that as the most important thing if you're in one. Now, if you're accepted, you could also decline to be in one. That's 100% up to you, right? They want you to participate as a willing participant. So if you change your mind about that, that's okay. But just know that we're going to view that as the most important one, and it will take precedence over the other things you put on your application, including roommate placement. Now, next question. Do living learning communities have different room types, and can they accommodate health conditions? Ashley, talk to us.
So the living learning communities, most students that are in these programs will be assigned to a standard double. That's the most common room type. Generally, you aren't allowed to make any preferences, which also includes roommates. So you want to take that into account. If you do have a health and disability need or a religious observance need, You'll need to make sure you submit the form, which is included in the housing application. I'll talk more about that later. But if you do have one of those needs and it's approved, we'll try our best to place you within that community. And if for some reason there isn't a room type available that you need that's within that area of housing, we'll work with you and those leaders to find a space that allows you to still participate in the program.
It's great. So can someone someone who's in a living learning community be roommates with someone who isn't? Matt, clarify that for us.
So only students that have been accepted to a living learning community can live in that space. If you have a roommate request and that person was not accepted to the community, then you would have to opt out of living in the living learning community in order to live with that roommate. Even if both of you have been admitted to the living learning community, though, the stance on whether or not that particular community will honor a roommate request differs from community to community. So sometimes, even if you request one another, they still might not place you together. It depends on the MLC or theme that you've been accepted to.
Someone wants to know, do I have to apply for housing if I'm already accepted into an MLC? The answer is yes. Please, please. Even if you have been accepted to an MLC already, even if you have a beautiful letter or an email embossed in gold that says you are a part of this learning community, welcome, you still need to apply for housing. You still need to get a housing contract that's signed and pick your meal plan and all that stuff. That's not kind of a nice extra. It is required. You don't get housing unless you apply for housing through the housing application, because the theme and MLC application is a separate thing over here that affects your housing, but you still got to do it. Let's do some quick ones about roommates. What are the chances I'll get the roommate I requested? So assuming that all your preferences line up between yourself and your roommate or roommates, and you request each other mutually, and no one is in a living learning community that would cause the roommate thing not to happen, we usually are able to accommodate roommate requests. We know that there must be a reason why you've requested these people, and we try to make it happen. Next question. I don't have a roommate now, let's say, but let's say I meet someone after I filled out the application. Or I filled it out now, but I want to go back and do it. Matt, can you add a roommate after filling out the application?
Absolutely. Just like anything else as far as the preferences are concerned, you can go back and edit it after the fact, as long as it's before, again, 11:59 p.m. on May 6th. There's a couple of key pieces to this. Like you were saying earlier, you do need to make sure all of your other preferences match up. So room type, environment preference, gender corridor designation. You also, this is the big one, want to make sure that the other person mutually requests you on their application. Because if it's not a mutual request, we can't place them together. If you find somebody after the deadline, contact us as soon as possible. The earlier the better. We can still try to get you placed together. Just like with any other request that impacts your placement, the earlier you get back to us about it, the easier it'll be for us to try to help you.
Great. So one of the preferences on the application is substance free. If you put down substance free as a preference, are you sure that the roommate is also substance free, or that the roommate also wanted that? Ashley, talk about that.
Yeah, so we only assign students to substance-free spaces that specifically request it. So if you don't have a certain roommate request, you can be assured that whatever roommate we signed to the space with you also requested a substance-free room.
Great. So that brings up the topic of roommates and communication. Is there a way to talk to potential roommates before being assigned with one or requesting one? Matt.
So a lot of students these days are using social media to connect with prospective roommates. But on the Student Housing Business Portal, where you actually fill out your application, we also have a roommate finder tool that you can use. And it's basically a simple questionnaire. It allows you to kind of put in some info about your habits and what you're looking for in a roommate. And it permits you to communicate with other people that have also filled out the questionnaire, and then you can kind of communicate externally if you're comfortable sharing that information. It does go offline after May 6th, so you can definitely use it as a starting point, but you may need to share outside contact info if you want to continue that conversation after the 6th.
Absolutely. Like Matt said, it's a great conversation starter. There's no really substitute for getting to know and being kind of clear about what you need. Now, here's a question that came in, and it comes in every year. Can a non-athlete room with an athlete? Matt?
That's largely going to depend on that student specific situation. If you're an athlete and you're here on an athletic scholarship, you are going to be housed with other athletes. If you're not here on an athletic scholarship, it shouldn't impact your placement or the requested roommate. If you're not sure where you fall in that category, you're going to want to check with your coach.
Great. So, how are roommates selected, by the way? It seems like a mystery. How many people typically go for random roommates nowadays? And when would you find out who the roommate is? Matt.
So roommates are either going to be random or requested. The number of students that don't request a specific roommate varies quite a bit from year to year. Some years we have a really high amount of people requesting mutual roommates. Sometimes we get a lot of people that don't request anybody at all. Kind of what we were alluding to earlier in terms of room dimensions, at that same time in early August, you're also going to find out who your specific roommate is. Just want to note that talking about the roommate finder previously, if you don't request a specific roommate, but you did use the roommate finder tool, we don't retain any of that data or use it for placements. So if you don't request a specific roommate, even if you use the roommate finder tool, the placement that you get is going to be truly random.
Great. So now we're going to talk all about accommodations, other factors that may go into where we place you. So we're very lucky to have Ashley with us. So Ashley, help us. How do accommodation requests work?
So as I said at the beginning, I manage all health and disability accommodation requests as well as religious observance requests. So you can, in the housing application, there is a question asking whether you have a health and disability need for your housing or whether you have a religious observance need. Choosing yes to that question will give you access to another form. It's not within the housing application, so go ahead and click yes, finish your housing application. And then once you submit that, you'll see on the housing business portal, another form will have popped up. And that's either the religious observance accommodation form or the health accommodation form, whichever one you chose yes to, or both. So make sure you submit that. You also can find access to the health accommodation form on the Michigan Housing website. Or you can just send us an email if you're like, hey, I have a health accommodation need and I think I might have done something wrong on my housing application, or I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Just email us and I will give you access to it. No problem.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone sends in documentation from their doctor for their health accommodation, for instance, is it guaranteed?
So every request is reviewed individually. So no housing accommodation request is necessarily guaranteed approval. I send all requests to medical professionals at University Health Services for their review. And then we review them internally as well. And then we'll send you a decision. So typically it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. We try to review quicker. But of course, during this time where we're receiving a lot of requests, it could take about 2 to 3 weeks to get an answer.
Okay, I'm going to jump down to this question here. What's your top tip? What's your wisdom about these health accommodation requests?
I get several questions from both parents and students asking if their condition or their religious observance request apply. What should they do? I encourage everyone to fill out the form and put all of your requests, everything that you think you might need, even if you're like, I'm not entirely sure if I need this, just put it in the form anyway, because that way we know everything up front. And we do make partial approvals. So you might get approved for part of the things you ask and part of the things you didn't, or you asked for may not get approved, but fill out the form if you're not sure, send us an email if you're not sure, and just make sure you put all of your requests in the form.
Okay, thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about COVID-19, because there are some definite important requirements that the university is observing. Question arises, when should you turn in your vaccination information? Answer, now. Just do it now. Just take care of it now. Don't wait. There isn't a better time. If you've got it, submit it now. For all students requesting housing for the fall term, vaccine and booster info needs to be submitted by May 15th. That doesn't mean do it on May 15th. That means do it now, and then maybe you've got a few days until afterwards, but by May 15th. we will be unable to offer housing assignments or contracts until your information is processed. So you want to get it in now so all that stuff can be processed behind the scenes by the right professionals so we can get it and say, okay, this person is ready to go. Let's work on their housing assignment. Otherwise, we're going to have to wait. And we don't want to have to wait on your housing assignment. So get that stuff in. Access to all the forms, including vaccine submission forms, the booster submission forms, and exemption requests. All of that is on the campus maze and blueprint. That's an essential source that has all the latest guidelines. So question comes up, when should I get my booster shot for COVID? Students will be eligible for a booster 5 months after their primary vaccine series. So you're only expected to get the booster when you're eligible. So a student may not become eligible for a booster until after May 15th. That's fine. Just make sure you submit your primary vaccine series as soon as you can. And if you haven't started your vaccine series, just do so immediately, right? This is a university policy, not just a housing policy. It's going to be an important part of actually being able to attend the university. So let's roll into furnishings and amenities. This is maybe the most important question. Do rooms have air conditioning? Matt, you know the answer to this.
Well, first of all, I do want to point out that on our website, housing.umich.edu, under living and then residence halls, there is a brand new button that just popped up a few weeks ago called our residence hall comparison chart. And it actually lists all of the residence halls and which ones have air conditioning. But just to make it easy for everybody here, that's going to be Alice Lloyd, Cousins, East Quad, Mosher Jordan, North Quad, Stockwell, and West Quad. All of those buildings have central air conditioning. If you have a medical need that requires air conditioning, we can provide an in-window unit. That's going to be through the accommodations request that Ashley was talking about earlier. If you're not assigned to a hall that has central AC, we will install that window unit if it's medically necessary. A medical need for air conditioning does not necessarily imply placement in a hall that has central air conditioning.
Yes, and like Matt says, we wouldn't necessarily place you in a hall that has air conditioning. We might install a unit in that particular room. Also, really important to note about all the halls, every single residence hall is located in the state of Michigan, making air conditioning not a primary requirement for most of your experience here on campus. For many people. All right, let's talk about meal plans. What are the meal plan options? Basically, there's 3 options: the unlimited basic, unlimited 200, and the unlimited 300. They are all, as you can tell by the name, unlimited, which means that students can swipe anywhere they want, as many times as they like, any dining hall we've got. So all of them give you these unlimited swipes. What's the difference? The difference are the extras. The 200 and 300 give you extra and these kind of blue bucks, dining dollars, these extra bits of campus currency. They let you eat at the kind of retail outlets, restaurants, snack bars, cafes, all over campus that are on campus, near where students often study. So they give you flexibility. For, let's say you want to grab a bite to eat after the dining halls close at 9 p.m. It's great to have on your meal plan already, right on your M card, some extra bucks to do that. But again, all of them are unlimited. Next question, what does a room come with? In all residence halls rooms, you will find an extra long bed. They take extra long linens, twin XL linens, Ethernet ports, recycle bin, a window treatment, fire smoke alarms, overhead lighting. It's exactly overhead lighting. And then modular furniture, or sometimes called building block furniture, that you can configure. So you can look up modular furniture on the housing website and you get a couple pictures of that. That's roughly what's in each room. Of course, what's really in that room is a space to create memories. But you bring that. You bring the tools to make that happen. All right, is there a list of things to bring? Yes. Go to the housing website. That's housing.umich.edu. Hit the help button and then type in what to bring. That will pull up a page called what to bring and what to leave at home. And we go into great detail into what you might bring, and especially excruciating detail and what you absolutely must not bring. So we don't leave it to chance. What are some things that you can't bring? Basically, if you need to set the thing on fire to make it work, no. And humidifiers, no. Can't do that. It sets off the fire suppression system. A router, you don't need it. We have Wi-Fi everywhere. Those are the biggest categories.
A quick note.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
A quick note about humidifiers is you can request one through the health accommodation process. So if you do need a humidifier, just make sure you fill out the health accommodation form.
Perfect. That's a great one. Thank you, Ashley. Are real plants allowed in residence hall rooms? Answer, yes. Are air fryers allowed in residence hall rooms? In some ways, the opposite of plants. The answer is also yes. So you never know what's going to be allowed. Double check that list of prohibited items. Room changes. Some people are already excited to change their room, although they haven't received it yet. I admire your foresight. You are forward thinking. You're not procrastinating. You're like, I'm already disappointed in what you gave me. Matt, can someone move to a different assignment mid-semester? How do they request a room change?
So normally, just as precursor to this, we definitely do not make any changes during the summer. So as assignments are going out, we won't be making any changes to them. We're too busy assigning thousands of other people at the same time, so we wouldn't have the ability to really change the spaces at that time. Change requests in general are going to start being reviewed and processed after move-in, roughly about 2 weeks into the term. And there's two different processes that'll be available to you. There's room change, which is where you as a resident are asking that we move you to another space that has a vacancy. Then there's what we call room swap, which is where you as a student that's a resident and another resident agree to swap your contracts. As much as we would love to give everyone the perfect space, we may be limited in what we can do, and you should plan on the assignment that you get to be the one that you will live in for the entirety of the academic year.
Great. I appreciate the solemnity and finality of that answer. It's. I think that ultimately you should know that there aren't much movement over the summer, like Matt said, and there are some options, but get used to what we've assigned you. Let's talk about move-in, since we're already excited there, and we'll get on some of your individual questions there. When is move-in? So there isn't one big move-in day. It's really more of like a move-in week. This year, move-in will be August 24th through August 28th. Now, don't buy your ticket today, even if you feel like you know exactly what day you want to go. And here's why. We will actually invite you to go online, starting in the first week of August, and select a particular time slot. This is very important because having time slots means that we can make sure the move-in is not too crowded for you. We can space it all out. It's nice, logical, smooth, relaxing, releases the density for public health considerations as well. So in early August, you'll be invited through your UMich email to go online, select a time slot. More info is coming soon. And if there are programs that actually require you to come to campus earlier, there may be a way for you to move on campus earlier. We'll be in contact with those programs. They'll be in contact with you about figuring out when your particular move-in day is for just some of those programs. But for most students, you can expect the 24th to the 28th. Now this time, because we have just a few more minutes left, we want to get some additional questions that are from you all that maybe we haven't got yet. And I will rely on our invisible assistants to let us know what are some of the biggest ones to answer. I think the first one we want to talk about, though, because I saw that one flagged in the chat, was for everyone. East Quad, we talk about that having a lot of gender inclusive bathrooms, but how about other, single gender bathrooms? Ashley, tell us about that.
Yeah, so there is a floor that's designated to the gender inclusive community. And so there are floors and corridors in East Quad that have gender designated, female designated or male designated community bathrooms. So you would only be placed in the gender inclusive community where there's a gender inclusive community bathroom if you choose that.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Someone else wants to know, is there an orientation week for first years? So plans for orientation are developing. They're underway right now. There's lots of campus stakeholders working together to plan things. Basically, there's going to be lots of things happening from the second you set foot here on campus. Really, whether you arrive early for a particular program or you're part of that move-in week, there's going to be stuff to do because classes are going to start pretty soon. And we want to make sure that you're figuring out where you need to go and getting used to campus. So be sure there's a whole buffet of things to do. And we really, really encourage you to get out, be active, and find things out. So someone wants to know, hey, if I live on campus, can I change my mind and move off campus? What's the refund situation? There's no better person than Matt to answer that one.
So basically, contracts are binding once they are signed, and that applies even before the academic year starts. So one of the key things I will always tell students when we're offering them assignments for the academic year is, you should only be signing this if you're 100% committed to living on campus. Once you sign the contract, then if you choose to cancel it at any point for reasons that are outside of I'm graduating, I'm disenrolling, or I'm going on study abroad for winter term, there is a penalty fee that is equal to 80% of the remaining contract obligation, which is however much time is left on the contract at the time that you leave. 80% of that is what you would owe as a penalty. Contract reassignment is something that we do offer where you can post an ad to try to offer your contract to somebody that does not currently have one and would like to live on campus, particularly getting close to the end of fall term, going into winter term. There are a lot of incoming winter term students that are looking for spaces. So that is a great resource and an option for you to try to get out of your contract without having to pay that penalty.
Great. So if someone wants to know, can we request 3 roommates? So if you're thinking about living in a quad, absolutely, you can request 3 other roommates, making sure, again, as Matt said, that you want to rank these roommates and that these are mutual requests. We say rank because you may not be able to get that suite option and put you in a double. It'll put you in a double with the number 1 ranked choice there. Someone wants to know, how do I maximize my chances of getting a single? Do I list my second preference as a suite style? I admire the foresight to work the system. Matt, what would you say? How do I increase my chances of getting a single?
I mean, the easiest way is to make sure it is your first preference. For singles, like I was saying earlier, because it is one of our most expensive room types, we really don't want to put students in a single unless they've specifically requested it, because of that cost factor involved. I don't think there's anything blocking you on the application from putting single as all 3 of your choices. That wouldn't necessarily increase your chances, but it would definitely be an emphatic statement of, yes, I really do want to be placed in a single.
Great. This is a really good question that just came in. I don't understand the room environment section. Shouldn't all residence halls be substance free? So the answer is yes, they effectively are. Essentially all residence halls are substance free. We follow all laws regarding substances. The rooms do not come with substances if they're not substance free rooms. That said, some students, when they come to start college life, they want to make a commitment to a kind of lifestyle, both in the residence hall and outside. And the people that you live around you, they can have a big impact on how you experience the rest of campus. So for students who say, not only do I want to enjoy the already substance-free experience of living in the residence halls, I want a roommate who gets it. I want neighbors who get what I'm trying to do here on campus. Then that's why we have that particular designation. It's really to support you in the commitment you want to make when you live here on campus. So I think actually with that, we are just about to our last question here that we could answer. So I think that was probably our last ones. We know there's a lot more, and a lot of them are already looking to year 2, but we can get some more. Email housing@umich.edu. We're happy to get them. One of the new ways we're answering questions is our Instagram @umich_housing. We answer questions on those basically every day, 7 days a week. Happy to do it. So let us know by email if you got more questions. Let us know on Instagram how you liked this webinar. We'll be doing another webinar over the summertime, and we'll be doing, I think, probably 2 of them. Another one about how to plan for moving in, and really about move-in in particular. So look out for those. You'll get emails through your UMich email account that those are coming down the works, because we love answering your questions. And it's not just now, it's going to be for all time, because we are very excited for you to call us home. On behalf of everyone here in Michigan Housing, thank you so much. This has been amazing, and we will see you in the fall. And take your time on that application, because there's some details there. It's important. Right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.